Greetings everyone, Rejnols here, your favorite person to talk about Custodes, and today we are talking about Custodes. I mean, that's kind of like my whole thing. Alright, so today we are talking about the new Custodes Meta, based on, some data. There has been a new Dataslate, there is a new meta, let's take a look at how it goes for the Custodes. As I literally just mentioned, we only have 2 weeks of total data at the moment. So there is no conclusive answer yet as to what is working for Custodes and what isn't, but we have some idea of where things are going. Now let's first talk about the first week of the data slate. For Custodes, it was a brutal one. Players had a hard time adapting, which resulted in a 38% win rate for that weekend. And we saw almost a 40% drop in players playing Custodes at tournaments. Obviously, a large number of those people are meta chasers. Which does mean that, the 38% win rate can also be attributed to, just bad players or casual players or whatever it may be. In any case, week 1 for Custodes was very bad. We just had week 2, and it was slightly better. We were now sitting at a 42% win rate, and we even had some top placing lists, which we will talk about later in this video. But it is still a big drop from where we were before, looking at 55% win rate. Oh, right, and I think I should just mention, on the image you can see it says 43% and not 42%. That's because one is from the Meta dashboard and the other one is from Meta Mondays. Meta dashboard includes, I think, smaller events as well, whereas Meta Monday only includes larger events. In any case, the numbers are so close that it doesn't really matter too much. But yeah, people are either having a hard time adapting or Custodes are just really bad. We will know much more certainly in a couple of weeks. For now though, it looks like Custodes are, in the dumpster. One thing I am very curious to hear is what you've been using after this data slate, what's been working for you. Feel free to share that in the comments below, perhaps you can inspire someone else who's trying to make a list but is not sure what to do at the moment. If you are one of those people, you should obviously also go ahead and type in the comments and be like, I've tried this, I tried that, it just doesn't work for me, and maybe someone can help you out. Maybe I can help you out, because later in this video, as I mentioned, we will be looking at some of the top placing lists for Custodes in week 2 after the data slate. Before we start talking about those lists, I think I need to talk a little bit about terrain. Because it matters a whole lot, and I think people are underestimating what terrain can do for an army. If you are located in the Americas, you're probably used to playing on something that looks like a GW layout. And you might think most tournaments use GW layouts, but in fact, almost every single country, or a region maybe even, or continent, who knows, have a different format they follow. For example, where I play, we mostly use WTC layouts. WTC layouts are commonly known for being more dense than GW, and obviously that's what I like the best because that's what I'm used to playing on. And also, I play melee armies. More dense terrain means that melee armies become more viable. However, there's also UKTC layouts, ITC layouts. Various tournaments have their own layouts. There are so many different ones and they can affect how much list building matters. Because if you're playing on a board with 6 pieces of terrain, well, shooting armies is going to have a really good time. There's lots of open angles, lots of line of sight points, and it makes life harder for a melee list. There's also the case of my previous video where the WTC layout just basically does not allow for land raiders to be used. If you have anything land raider size that cannot walk through walls, which I think nothing can at that point or like at that size, that's also something. Like WTC just straight up eliminates the possibility of using land raiders. You can still use them, just not very effectively. So what I'm trying to get at here is that when you look at a tournament list, you also need to keep in mind what terrain they're playing on. Now, I know for a fact that American tournaments usually include a whole lot of people compared to European tournaments. That also means that they need to include a whole lot of terrain for a whole lot of tables. You can imagine a US-based grand tournament with, say, 100 players attending. If they're using WTC layouts, which usually starts at 10 terrain pieces, they would need 10 terrain pieces for 100 people. That means 50 tables. That means 500 pieces of terrain to just run the tournament. I'm not going to go out and say this layout works better, or this is the best, or this is the most fair. I think every terrain layout, except for player placed is dumb, is completely fine. However, You just need to keep in mind when you look at a list or you talk about what's working or what isn't working, terrain is a huge part of it. Now, for an example of this big tournament, low density terrain, let's look at this image right here on the screen. I'll go ahead and move my camera over here for now, but this image is actually taken from the London Grand Tournament, which I think is this weekend. I might be wrong. In any case, this is the terrain they're playing on, at least for one of the missions. Anyone else notice something? Perhaps the 10 to 12 inch gaps between the ruins? I mean, this layout screams shooting army or a shooting list. You have so many angles you can shoot from no matter where you're on the map. Let's say you're holding the objective over here, right? Alright, so if you're holding it right on the corner, you can shoot up here, you can shoot down there, you can shoot straight down the middle. So many opportunities to shoot. Now let's pretend you're a melee army. From this corner here to this corner here is 7 inches. Maybe it's 6 inches. My point being that most infantry in the game, outside of advancing, moves like 6 or 7 inches. So they will have to advance to get from this terrain piece to that terrain piece. Even then, they probably have to roll fairly highly on their advance to be wholly within the terrain piece. And if they're not wholly within the terrain piece, well, in that case, they can probably be seen from, up here or up there or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it is no wonder that some tournaments just have shooting list win, because that's just how it works. It's so much easier for a shooting list to operate when terrain is like this. Once again, that is not to say that a melee army cannot win. I'm just saying that depending on the layout, then that could also depend your list building, especially if you are a competitive player who's looking to win the whole thing. In the defense of the London Grand Tournament, I do believe there's like a crazy amount of players, like 200 to 300 people, which once again would mean a crazy number of terrain pieces. There's also just simply the case of how they've set up, they can be turned around, they can be put closer, so many options. In any case, that was a quick word about terrain and why you need to think about terrain when you're building your list for a tournament, as well as when you're analyzing a list from a tournament. Alright, that was enough talking about the terrain layouts. Now let's look at a list. This weekend, or previous weekend, we had 2 top 10 placing lists. The first one was from Warzone Houston with 123 players. Not sure how there was 123 players, but I guess someone dropped. And this list ended in the 10th place. The list was, as on screen, Shield Captain with the Inspirational Exemplar enhancement, Shield Captain with the enhancement Ceaseless Hunter, 4 Prosecutors, 3 Alaris Custodians, 1 Caladius Graph Tank, 2 Caladius Graph Tanks, 5 Custodian Wardens, 5 Custodian Wardens, 6 Venatari, and finally 4 Witch Seekers. This list does not have a ton of units to play with, however, Caladius Graph Tanks are an amazing unit in the Custodes arsenal. They are big, which is both good and bad. It's bad because it makes it hard to move around certain terrain layouts, but it's also good because it helps with screening. It means it can hold objectives while also peeking around terrain to be able to shoot. And the shooting it does put out is significant. However, I've done the math. I'm not going to do a whole talk about it right now. But in short, bringing 1 Caladius Graph Tank will not kill like a T10 vehicle on average. You need 2 of them. You need 2 of them to truly have efficient anti-tank output, especially at 215 points per model. So that is something to keep in mind. I don't think it's viable to bring a single Caladius Graph Tank. You need 2 or 3 before it even actually starts paying off to bring them. The 3 Alaris Custodians is a little bit surprising to me. I don't think 3 Alaris does as well as 2 Alaris when it comes to just playing the objective. They do have a little bit more kill power and they are a little bit more threatening. And I suppose if you keep them in reserves to try and deep strike to do objectives or steal an objective, then it does make sense to run 3 of them. It might have been worth considering just running 2 Alaris Custodians and then have them be purely secondary players, and then include another unit of Witch Seekers, another unit of Prosecutors, whatever those 70 points buy you. You could even take a better enhancement for the Shield Captain. And in total, you would still have the Alaris for objective play, but you'd also have more units for screening and, more objective play. The Wardens I see no issue with. Actually, how I've been building lists since the update has basically always been, alright, 2 times 5 Wardens and 2 characters for those Wardens. That is my baseline. I think Custodian Wardens are probably the best unit in the Custodes book right now. They are still Custodians in melee, but they're also extremely tanky, and if you're a little bit lucky on your rolls, you can quite literally withstand like 1,000 points of shooting or even more when you activate the Feel No Pain. Probably even more if you also couple that on with -1 damage, assuming the opponent has a lot of, damage 2 or damage 3 shots. The 6 Venatari is something that I've seen a lot of people talk about. I haven't tried running a 6-man Venatari squad yet, but I do like the Venatari. I think they are excellent. Rapid ingressing for free and then moving 10 means that you can actually place them like outside of 12 and still be efficient in reaching whatever target you want to. Because you place them outside of 12, then you move 10, and then you have a 2-inch charge, and you're like, yep, okay, that works out for me. So even if you're up against someone who's playing with infiltrators or other things that deny deep striking within 12 inches, or even just someone who has, screens to put in front of their important stuff, Venatari are a decent answer to that because they move so far and they rapid ingress for free. I've only been running 3-man Venatari squads because I've been using them as a mix of, this is a scary unit, it's not going to kill anything huge, but it can kill like a 5-man squad. But I can also drop them down and have them do objective holding or secondary objective play without feeling terrible about it. When you do run a 6-man squad, it's obviously, I'm gonna go kick your butt. Because 400 points for 6 guys and then not using them to go kick some butt is just, way too expensive. Finally, we have the Witch Seekers. These girls are kind of just like prosecutors. They have flamers, which can be nice against some chaff, but they do have a scout move, which allows you to do some secondaries a little bit easier turn 1 compared to not bringing any. Finally, we have the double shield captains. I mean, I don't see anything wrong about it, but I don't see quite the reason for them. I mean, double karate is great. It increases the output of the wardens quite a bit. Triple karate once per game is also great. But I just think I'd be a bigger fan of like including a a blade champion or Valyrian or Trajan Valoris. Doubling up on the shield captains just kind of means that if one of the squads dies, then yes, you have free stratagems for the other squad. But, at that point, it's probably too late in the game. That's just my opinion though. I did not place 10th, this guy did, so maybe he knows something that I don't. Overall, it's a list. Yeah, double Wardens, double Caladius Graph Tank seems to be a very common go-to for Custodes these days. Or at least I would say so if our second list didn't break that. Because our second list is coming in from Australia. This was the second place list. He actually went 5-0. But I'm not sure if they had a shadow round or the winner was determined on battle points or victory points or whatever the case is. He didn't lose any games, but he did play second. So his list is a shield captain in Alaris Terminator armor with Ceaseless Hunter, Valyrian, 5 prosecutors, 5 Alaris custodians, another 5 Alaris custodians, 3 Alaris custodians, Caladius Graph Tank, and another Caladius Graph Tank, and 5 custodian wardens. Alright, so this list is quite different. You will notice that Ceaseless Hunter is absolutely amazing. Being quite honest, if you're in combat with something and you don't kill them with Custodes, things are looking bad. So the whole fallback shoot and charge is nice to have. The big deal about it is that it lets you do a move of 5 inches with Terminators because it's up to 6-inch movement, but Terminators only move 5. So when an enemy ends a move within 9 inches of one of those 5-man Alaris Custodian units, that unit can either be like, okay, let me just jump behind the wall so you cannot shoot me. Or if something falls back, they can be like, I'm gonna go ahead and follow you over there. A very, very strong enhancement. And yeah, we saw it in the previous list. We see it in this list. I think you'll see it in basically every top placing Custodes army because it is an absolutely super valuable enhancement. It gives some very much needed movement to the Alaris Custodians, but it can also be used by, a Warden squad or even a Guard squad being led by a character. Speaking of characters, Valyrian! He showed up! What the hell? No, but quite honestly, Valyrian has actually been, I don't want to say secretly OP, because he's not. He's fine. He was fine on release, it was just that everything else was better. Now, Valyrian is the cheapest HQ options for Custodes. He's 5 points cheaper than a Blade Champion, he's 25 points cheaper than a Shield Captain, and he's like 45 points cheaper than Trajan Valoris. On top of that, because Custodes got nerfed, we actually have been seeing more melee armies performing and just showing up at tournaments. Valyrian's ability for a unit when he's leading them is Armor of Contempt in melee. In other words, subtract 1 AP. That ability was completely useless before. Not because it was a bad ability, but because Custodes would just absolutely eviscerate whatever they came in contact with. I mean, Valyrian in a 10-man Custodian squad. Alright, let's see. Do I need this -1 AP, or am I just gonna kill them before they kill me? Whereas now, we're limited to smaller unit sizes, our things cost more points, and melee's actually, a player. Melee is not a player. Melee is a thing. Melee exists outside of Custodes, is what I'm trying to say. And then all of a sudden, Valyrian makes perfect sense. He's cheap, he gives you defensive buffs in melee, now you might actually need them. And honestly, that's enough. He does also have a passive about rerolling one of his own dice, one of his attacks or whatever. That one is like, it's not that great, it's fine. But the boost to defense in melee for Custodes is viable. And again, he's also the cheapest option. Then we have 5 prosecutors instead of 4. I assume he had 10 points left over and he wanted to use Valyrian because otherwise he could have upgraded Valyrian to a blade champion. But yeah, prosecutors, backline, objective holders, do some screening. That's their purpose. That's what they do for Custodes. Then we have the 5-man Alaris blocks, 2 of them. Now, I did say that I think Wardens are the best unit for Custodes now, but Alaris are obviously very close up there. Custodian guards, well, they're still good. However, their rerolls depends on them controlling an objective. When you could take them as a 10-man squad, it was usually pretty easy to overwhelm something on an objective with OC3 because you had the Vexilla, because you had a 10-man squad, so why wouldn't you just bring a Vexilla? But now that you're limited to a 5-man squad, bringing the Vexilla means that you lose quite a bit of value and you're paying 40 points for something that's not gonna do a whole lot. However, Custodian Terminators, or Alaris? Is it actually Alaris? Have I been saying Alaris when it's actually Alaris? That's for another day. Custodes Terminators have rerolls all the time against character units, monsters, and vehicle units. Now, you're not always going to be fighting character units, monsters, or vehicles. However, if you're fighting something that's valuable to your opponent, chances are there's a character included in that unit, or it's a monster, or it's a vehicle, which means that Alaris, we got them rerolls. At the same time, their output is also slightly better than Custodian Guards because of their grenade launchers. Couple that with the rerolls, you can actually shoot grenade launchers and spears into high toughness things and still do a decent amount of damage. 2 units of 5 Alaris Custodians sounds absolutely amazing, and you know what, if I had that many Alaris Terminators, I would totally try and run this list. But alas, I don't. I only have 9. But that is, that is a very, very good thing for me to see that Alaris are actually viable as your big scary unit. But we're not done with the Alaris yet because there's also a 3-man squad. And I will say the same thing as I did before. I'm just not sold on the 3-man squads. I think I would rather just make it a 2-man squad and then invest those 70 points into either getting another unit of prosecutors, another unit of witch seekers, or upgrading Valyrian to a Trajan or something else. I'm just not a big fan of 3-man Alaris Custodians. That's my personal take. But again, this guy plays second, not me, so he probably knows what he's doing. Then once again we have the double Caladius Graph Tank, kind of just confirming what I said before. I don't think they work on their own. You need to have 2 of them to guarantee the output that you can kill whatever you target. And 2 of them is like the minimum sweet spot for that. You can bring 3 if you want to be really sure or you want to take really into shooting, but 2 is the minimum. And then we have 5 Custodian Wardens. They're tanky. They're still Custodians in melee, so they'll still do a lot of damage against a lot of things. They're being led by Valyrian, which means they're not only tanky because of the 4-up feel no pain and -1 to wound, but they also have -1 AP. As someone who played a Warden squad with Valyrian into Tyranids, it was kind of stupid. I mean, everything Tyranids in melee that is not a big monster is AP 1 at most. And Custodian Warden's like, oh yeah, you have your Von Ryan's Leapers with the 60 attacks. Alright, okay, cool. Here is 22 up saves. Oh, look at that. I failed 3. 1 guy dies. Alright, let's talk. So yeah, Valyrian in Custodian Wardens, if you're expecting to play against melee armies, is super valuable and super viable. And that concludes the list review or list look for Custodes for this week. So the question kinda is double Caladius just the new meta? And as I said, we don't quite know yet. Right now, signs are pointing towards Caladius Graph Tanks, Custodian Wardens is a really, really good start. However, for example, if you're playing on the terrain that I'm playing on, the big models, such as Caladius Graph Tanks, becomes a little bit unwieldy and a little bit harder to effectively use because it'll take more to move them around the table and therefore get line of sight, etc., etc. But the terrain that you're playing on might be perfect for them. So if you do own 2 Caladius Graph Tanks and 10 Wardens, I can totally see that being a good base template for a list. Alright, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And leave a comment below if you want to see more of these meta reviews of Custodes. I'm not sure they're worth doing every week, but every other week might be a fun thing to do, you know, to keep a track of what's going on and how the Custodes meta is developing. If that is something you would like, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and until I see you again, I hope you have a wonderful time.